Ooh, Asquali, thank you so much for having the Honor Collective here. I'm the founding matriarch, but that's no more or less important than the other matriarchs who I'll have introduced themselves. If you do go through the Instagram, you will notice that there are some missing. Arizona is sick. There's a lot of flu, laryngitis, sore throat going around, so there are 4 of us here. I will go ahead and get us started with introductions. So, no Melody on Matsiwa, no Hopiat, Nakai Dene. I am Melody Lopez. I am Hopi, Navajo, Pueblo, and Mexican. I got my master's in social welfare a few decades ago at UC Berkeley and have been practicing whew, many places, currently in Tucson, Arizona, um, where I put in the chat, I'm coming to you from the Atam Druid. And I think that's very important because I am not from this land. But when I tell you that I'm here on this land, I want you to know that I say that because I worked in respect, responsibility, in relationship, and in responsibility to the land herself as well as the people of the land. So it's not like an empty hollow. This is the space that I'm occupying. This is really an introduction to who I am and how I serve. I'm going to let people introduce themselves before I talk about the Honor Collective. So I'm going to go in the row that I see everyone. So that's Kelly, Anissa, then Tanisha.
Thank you for that, Melody. And hello to the Honor Collective. Thank you for joining us today, as well as everybody else. So yat esh a Kelly Ray Vio Yin Chia Twitch in Jonah Aidne Bushes Chin, Desh Tini Dash Che Kohni Dene Dashanelis. So I'm half Navajo and half Acoma Pueblo. I am of the Bitterwater clan, born for the Sun People clan. My maternal clan is the start of the Red Streak people. My paternal clan is the Acoma Pueblo. I am an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation. Knowing that I had said my maternal clans first, we are a matrilineal tribe. I am originally from the Navajo Nation in a little community called Nuzlini, Arizona, but my family live in another small community called Chinle, Arizona, which is the Canyon de Chelly region. But currently I reside here in Phoenix, Arizona. I am an Diné or Navajo social worker. I have been a social worker for over 14 years. I received my bachelor's and master's in social work, and I'm currently in the doctorate behavioral health program at Arizona State University. So my experience are as a social worker actually grassroots. And so I have started out as a micro social worker, if you will, working in a behavioral health field with in a behavioral health agency to then an integrated care agency. But now I work with an agency that works with the 21 out of 22 tribes in Arizona. So I'm a Native youth coordinator. My job consists of advocating for the Healthy Native Youth website, as well as providing healthy Native youth sexual education in teen pregnancy and HIV prevention. As well as I am a youth mental health first aid instructor for Indigenous communities. And I am currently on another project working with our Arizona State Attorney General's office on creating a curriculum on human trafficking in Indigenous communities. Aside from that, I'm also the CEO and founder of Bahanet Consulting. It is a consulting firm that provides support to agencies and Indigenous communities, utilizing cultural and traditional Indigenous knowledge, if you will. So a lot of hats, a lot of things. And I'm also a mom. I have my own family, but that's not really important. No. But thank you all for joining us. I shall pass the baton, or should I say the feather, onto Anissa.
Hi everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name's Anissa McKenna. I'm from the Pasquayaki tribe here in Tucson, Arizona, on Autumn land, like Melody mentioned. Um, uh, I've been with Honor for a couple of years, and I guess I don't come from like a social work perspective. I went to school for environmental science, so um, I did my bachelor's, master's at the University of Arizona, and now I work as a tribal climate resilience liaison for American Indian Higher Education Consortium. So that's like the governing body of all the tribal colleges in the country. And I also work with this other USGS run center called the Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. So basically, what I do is like try to provide resources to tribal colleges and tribes around climate change and climate resilience. So that's me. I don't know if I had anything else to say, so I guess I'll pass it on to Tanisha.
Hi everyone. Ja, she Tanisha Bosley Yanishia. She Kenya Ani Nishla, Pitzakni Bashichin, Kip the Chini Dashiche, Glazathan Dashnella Akot Ego the Net Astan Nishla. Hi, my name is Tanisha Bosley. I am of the Towering House clan, born for the folded arm people. My maternal grandfather is of the Red House clan, and my paternal grandfather is of the Mini Goats clan. I am originally from northern Arizona from the Navajo Reservation as well. I'm currently living in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm a student at the Arizona State University School of Social Work, completing my bachelor's in the spring and going on to the master's program. And I have been honored to work alongside these honor matriarchs for about 5 months now, and they are full of Indigenous knowledge and healing powers. And every day I'm always learning something, and I'm grateful to be working alongside them. And with that, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Tanisha. That was just lovely. So, Kelly, by the way, you have the best introduction. Like, I've got to someday up my introduction. I'm just like, yeah, Melody, have a good day, you know? So a little bit about the Honor Collective. We began in 2019, so it's a fairly new organization. And we started because the Tucson area had Take Back the Night. I'm assuming some of you might be familiar, especially if you work in sexual assault, domestic violence, with the Take Back the Night movement. I know it's global. And in the Tucson area, despite the fact that there's two really large tribes, in fact, Danato Nation is like the second largest tribe in, oh God, I'm sorry you pinned me. Can you just keep the whole collective up there? It's way more comforting. Thanks. So they decided in 2019 that they wanted murdered, missing Indigenous women to be their theme, which, by the way, we are not a theme. That's like so uncool. And they invited every Native person they knew. So 5 people came. And in time, we started kind of just asserting what we need to do. We asserted our sovereignty needs. We wanted it on O'odham land. We approached, of course, we went through all the protocols. We went to tribal council. We asked for permission. We were given land. The community, which was O'odham. Yes, Anissa did introduce herself. And we went to walk out them, and we had an amazing event. We had hundreds of people. But as we began to ask people, do you know what murdered, missing Indigenous women even means? We got a lot of, they didn't know what it meant. So at that time, it was just 3 of us because Native women started dropping out. And from a lack of understanding and consistent miscommunication, we called up everyone we knew. And so we had like, hey, can you come to this meeting in 2 days to help us? And I'm not joking, like the room was packed. There was 50 people came. Our community came out. Yaqui came out. Atam came out. Urban Indians all came out. And we held the event. And it was amazing, healing, beautiful space. And that's how Honor Collective was born, was Indigenous people coming forward and saying, this is what we need, and this is how we need it. So we didn't follow the Take Back the Night format at all. We actually turned the whole second half of the event into a healing event. And I'm still touched when I think about it, because all the traditional people came out that evening and blessed everyone before we left. And that was just much more than we could have ever expected. And from that time, Honor has shifted, changed, grown, figuring out who we are. We are Indigenous women, two-spirit, non-binary, and trans individuals who are identifying the feminine. And we definitely have sons, husbands, brothers that participate, but all the decisions were matrifocal and matrilineal. So that's how we move forward in the world together. And then we also said, well, murdered missing Indigenous women is, and let me tell you, I have connection to this personally, professionally, since I started social work over 30 years ago, before there was an acronym. We took an expansive view that it is more than just women. It is our true spirit, it is men, and there are different aspects of that that need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed differently. But it's all something, it's children, it's elders. There's a lot of reasons for this. It's the earth herself, which that's why it makes a lot of sense having Anissa in here too, because harm against the earth is harm against Indigenous bodies. So our Secretary of Interior, Deb Holland, she created an office of MMIR, which is Murdered Missing Indigenous Relations, because these are our relations. We are coming to you from Honor, both personally and professionally, with this information. And her quote is, someone can paste it in, or I can paste it in later. The murdered and missing Indigenous peoples crisis is centuries in the making and will take focused effort and time to unravel the many threads that contribute to the alarming rates of these cases. And there are so many things to be done in MMIR. We do the healing part. Other people that we love and care for, they do the policy part. We have other people that serve us in different ways. We have Kumtrud Key that's not here right now, and they have a shelter on a reservation. We have Sewa Usam, and they provide caseworks from Pasquayaki. So there are many people, and we collaborate together. We are in healing. And to do healing work is something that goes beyond the NASW Code of Ethics. It's a much higher level of standard that we hold ourselves to. And at the baseline, because I don't have a day with you, I would take a day with you, by the way. At the baseline is the 4 R's: respect, responsibility, relationship, and reciprocity. And so, I'd kind of like us, Kelly, Tanisha, Anissa, just unmute, because what I really want everyone to see, first of all, this is how we operate. We work on this with each other. Right now, I did an introduction of honor, but there's so much more to it. And really, I just say we popcorn around talking about we've been working. There's a lot of events. Community calls us in all the time, all year round. It's not just May 5th, which is the International Day of Murdered Missing Indigenous Relations. It's all year. I mean, that's something we're going to next week at Pasquayaki, twice, to work with their young people. So y'all talk about some R's.
Oh, go ahead,
Okay.
Tanisha. No, go ahead, Tanisha.
I was just going to mention that at time I remember implementing the 4 R's is when we created a healing space for boarding school survivors at the Lost Cinema when they filmed The Bones of Crows, which was based on the historical trauma of boarding school children. And we implemented relationship applied when we created new relationships with other organizations in Tucson who came to the showing, but also created a relationship between those who viewed the film to resources maybe they were unaware of. They created relationships with non-natives, but we created relationships with non-natives for providing knowledge and awareness of how history impacted Native people. And the reciprocity applied when we handed out medicine bundles to Indigenous peoples, and gave them resources from the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition for traumatic stress, sexual assault, domestic violence, behavioral and cognitive therapies, anxiety, and strategies for self-care. And in return, we in some ways created conversations about behavioral and mental health within families and opened doors to healing for some of those Indigenous relatives.
Yeah.
And that is how I think we implemented reciprocity in that event that we held.
Awesome. Thank you for that too, Tanisha. And those are just some of the events that we've done. But one thing that I also wanted to, talk about is the way we meet as a collective. We don't follow any, and I'm just going to say westernized formats as an organization. I know we've all heard of Robert's Rules of Order, correct? Like the president, the vice president. We do not follow any of those frameworks or guidelines. How we apply the 4 R's isn't just for the community and how we engage in the community, but it's also how we engage with one another. And that's also how we hold each other accountable. And so what the 4 R's has done in retrospects to how we are a collective is we hold each other accountable through how are we showing respect to each other? How are we showing respect to the topic? How are we showing respect? How well we show respect in the community? When we're talking about relationship, how are we building that relationship with each other? How are we showing what being a good relative is to one another? And in this sense, one of the things that Melody I pointed out is how do we be professional relationships to or a professional relative to one another? We also have the responsibility to mean what we say and say what we mean. But we also understand that life happens. We have families, we have jobs, we have other extracurricular activities that we do outside of our work, our job. And so being a part of the collective, it's not an obligation to where it's like, you have to be here. We understand that as matriarchs and as non-binary, we're people first. We're humans. We're mom, we're sister, we're cousin, and so our responsibilities at home exceed our responsibilities here. Not that I'm saying this isn't important, but we understand family. That's the relationship part. And the reciprocity that we have with one another is, to be honest, we are all best friends. And I don't mean that to say like, oh my gosh, we're a little house on a prairie, right? No, we definitely build that family kinship with each other. And what we do is we model that kinship with each other out into the community. Now, I'm not saying like it's always perfect, but abiding by the 4 R's and utilizing that as a guide has helped us not only be able to advocate what it is that we want, but to also show what true kinship is amongst Indigenous communities within tribal nations. And that's why we did not want to choose to follow any of that. And it has worked. We hold each other accountable. It's not like we say, Anissa, you shouldn't have said that. It's more like, instead of calling someone out, we say, how is the way we've behaved, respectful? Or how are we showing relationship? Or if we have an event, or if someone wants us to speak at an event, we'll be like, so how does this apply to the 4 R's? Would we be providing the 4 R's to this community? And then with that being said, Tanisha had named some of the events that we had helped out and was present in with the community. We also have a form that we created, that one of our honor collective matriarchs created. And that was more like how is the event that the agency is hosting, how are they applying the 4Rs to the community? It sounds like it's very exclusive, but I will say it is, because we don't uphold violence. We don't talk about violence. We don't talk about, anything that hurts community. And so we want to make sure that whatever we're representing within the 4Rs is something that the community can take away from. We're bringing positiveness. We're bringing, Indigenous art and storytelling, which is the way it always used to be in the beginning. And so, as I had mentioned, how I apply the 4Rs, it really took a lot for me to unlearn what I learned at the institution that I received my degrees in, especially within social work. And I've already had my opinions on social work altogether, but I could never find an agency that actually related or understood where I was coming from until I had interned with Indigenous Strategies, which is another business of Melody, and she was my instructor, my intern instructor, if you will. And she gave me a whole new way of thinking, because she understood where I was coming from, and she understood how I wanted to help Indigenous communities and tribal nations, bands, villages. And that's another thing too, making sure that we are naming each nation by its appropriate name. Not all tribal nations are nations. Some of them are villages, some of them are bands, some of them are communities. And so the more you know, right? And so that kind of helped me when she introduced the 4Rs. And so I was like, yes, this is definitely the space that I need to be in. And it did take a lot for me to unlearn, because technically I grew up traditional. My family are traditional, cultural and traditionally traditional. But I applied that traditionalism in everything. I applied that traditionalism in social work, and traditionally, this is how social work works, and this is what we're supposed to do. But coming into these group of matriarchs, I definitely had to relearn and self-reflect on what Melody had talked about. The National Code of Ethics was what was instilled into me, but I was like, this is far more than the dignity and self-worth of the person, right? It is far more than, the competency of making sure that we're providing the services. With Indigenous communities, we don't think that way. When we provide our support, it's not a service, it's the kinship, it's the relationship. And so technically, Indigenous social work has been around even before time immemorial and before the colonial experience. And so what we try to do with the 4Rs is making sure that we're bringing that back, and we're healing from trauma, historical trauma, multi-generational trauma. And so that's where my experiences of utilizing the 4Rs have come into play. And it's taken me this far. And I can see how the 4Rs with the matriarchs that we are with now, it has given them so much confidence in regards to being able to voice what they feel is right and isn't right. And what's beautiful about it is we do it in a more respectful manner than pointing our fingers. But that doesn't say that if things aren't right, we're not going to say something like, but so I just wanted to express, like, that's how it's affected me in a positive way. And that's how it's helped me work. It's made me a better professional even in my work environment, on how I communicate with my coworkers, how I communicate with people in the community. So thank you for listening.
Anissa, you've been quietly listening. I know it's really hard to follow Kelly.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I talk too much sometimes.
No, you don't talk too much. You're just like really powerful.
Oh, thank you.
So it's hard to go after you.
But I will say this though. Anissa is, I'm just gonna tell everybody here, and I share it with her all the time. She's my care bear. Like, I love to hug Anissa, and when I hug her, I just know everything's gonna be okay. She has that power. And so, and I can't help, I always get emotional when I say this, but yeah, if she were a spirit animal, she'd be my spirit animal. I'm just saying. Her words are powerful too, dude. She'll
They
put me in check with just saying, Kelly. I'll be like, okay, I get
Aw,
it.
wow, that's so like nice to hear. So yeah, I'm really grateful for our relationship, which I guess is what I want to talk about, I guess,
Mm.
or go into more detail about. Because like yeah, like I was saying in my little introduction that I gave, I've been with Honor now for a couple years, maybe since 2021. And how I started out with Honor was kind of being brought in for this community event that was going to take place with my community, the Pasquayaki tribe, around providing like a workshop of sorts around missing and murdered Indigenous relatives to my tribe's like wellness department, a segment, I guess, of the wellness department that focuses on like more social work part of things. So that's how I got involved with Honor. And I mean, like being involved in planning the workshop and facilitating the workshop was kind of like my first go at doing this type of community work that's like very like intentional and like well thought out, and like taking into account all these things like the 4 R's that maybe like other organizations don't take into account when they think about working with community. So yeah, it's kind of like instead of like dipping your toe into something, I kind of just like cannonballed in, I guess, to this kind of stuff. But it's been like really awesome to see so far, like the growth in relationship, like not just between us as like, honor members and matriarchs in honor, but also like the relationship that honor has created with communities here in Tucson, like the Pasquayaki tribe, like Seva Usim, which is the Pasquayaki tribe's like mental health or wellness department. I should know the correct title, but you know what I mean. And then also like the relationship honors building with the Autumn community as well here, with their, someone tell me if I'm wrong, their domestic violence team, Komchud Key,
yeah,
like there's a relationship being built there and with that community. And it's like the proof is that we're continuing to work with these groups. So like back in 2021, working with Seva Usim, and now again this year we're starting to work with them again because now, because we have this relationship, they know that they can come to honor with these kinds of like requests for collaboration on events like something around MMIR or like something around Orange Shirt Day, and same with Komchu Key. Like we're continuing this relationship, and I guess that's just really cool to see, like how because we've applied the 4 R's this whole time, like our relationships are sustainable, and like people are starting to like recognize honor as like a good partner to bring into community, which is really cool to see. So, and I guess I'll just say, like, for me, like building relationship, I know it's like one of the 4 R's, but it like takes all those other R's to like build relationship, especially when you're going into a community that maybe you haven't worked with before. So I guess I would just say that. And also love you, Kelly, for that cute little thing you said about me. But yeah.
I'm glad you said that because it is it is humbling to be brought in to communities. We're not there to extract anything. Um, we're not there because we got a grant. We're not there because they're paying us. We're just always ever present for when they need us. And it turns out they need more and more. And I wish some people were here that, again, they were sick. But there's just something about our community wants you to be here. And it's not tabling. We don't do like tabling. We don't have pamphlets or anything like that.
Oh,
We
no.
engage community.
Yeah.
And like Kelly said, a lot of arts, a lot of storytelling, but
Mhm.
it's always centered in healing. And so I'm going to give an example because we talked about Orange Shirt Day a few times, and I have one of my orange shirts here. This is something that we were given from actually Canada, from First Nations people. It was actually for them, it was a red shirt activity. And this was at Walking with Our Sisters at Batoche in Canada in 2019. We also are very transnational. So we recognize Indigenous peoples from other spaces. And the Canadian women, they gave us this activity and they showed us how to do it, told us to take it and do healing, work with it. It's just felt, but there's the embroidery or the painting, and then you sew up the sides, and then you leave a bit open, and then you have medicine inside. Oh my gosh, I can still smell this. This was years ago. I think this is Kelly's lavender.
Lavender is very, very awesome.
Right. That's probably why I keep it next to me.
Yeah.
But when we do these healing activities, we go out, we work with our plant people, and we pick the medicine and we pray and we do all of those things, that when we bring medicine to community, it's not something we picked up at a store. It's something that was thoughtfully constructed. I really like that you said that, Anissa, about thinking. Every honor meeting, we have an hour-long topic discussion on name it. So sometimes it's the 4 R's. Everything is super intentional. And I think that comes out. So this is a very intentional activity. This isn't as simple as an arts and crafts. I've heard people say, you do arts and crafts. I'm like, no.
No.
Right? They're
No.
like, oh,
No, definitely.
It's not arts and crafts. And there is just so much, like I said, prayer and goodwill.
Very, yeah. It's a very and one thing is that I just kind of wanted to just kind of iterate in regards to what we're talking about here is when we're talking about working with Indigenous communities. I know a majority of you may have, and I'm assuming here, I know a majority may have, we're thinking that we're going to be talking about our organization and how we provide services and what. This is definitely not that space. We are not an organization that provides any type of service. We are an organization that's made up of non-binary matriarchs, and we come from different backgrounds. We have an attorney that's a part of our matriarch. We had an elder who was a part of our matriarch, but now she's taking care of her family. But the thing with our organization is they leave, they come back. You know, everything is open arms. We have Anissa that works in environments. We have Tanisha, who's a student. We have, you know, Melody, who's a business worker. Like we have all of community, and that's what makes up community. And what we're presenting here is something that's totally different in regards to what we're used to as social workers. We're used to hearing about organizations, right? We're used to hearing about services that they provide. We want those pamphlets. We want to be, who do we refer our people to? The collective is not that type of organization. We do have some therapeutic activities that can be identified as, you know, as such. However, we don't counsel people. We listen to their stories. We share, you know, lived in experience. It's, you know, it's more like there. Okay, so for example, we did a healing activity with the Two-Spirit Powwow here in Phoenix, Arizona. We wanted to show our support for our relatives, our two-spirited relatives. And not all Indigenous nations or not all tribal nations call themselves two-spirit. So it's just kind of understanding where that comes from. And just a little history, it came out in 94, the term two-spirit. It was a term that was only developed and created for Indigenous people. So those that are non-Indigenous cannot use that two-spirit term, just as an FYI. And so we wanted to show that support. And so showing that support, we literally had a group of, you know, people at our table. At that time, it was the women, and we called it the auntie table. And it was a place where community came. And that's pretty much what it is. We involve community. They guide us, to tell you the truth. They guide us on what it is that they want, or what it is that is affecting, you know, what's their challenge at that moment. It could be a community, it could be an individual. And just from my observations, Anise is great with kids. I'm just gonna say, she
Yes.
is amazing with children. And each one of us brings in our own skill. Each one of us brings in what makes the collective a collective. And so when we talk about working with Indigenous communities, a lot of that westernized theology and frameworks of social work, it's implemented on, this is how you work with people of color communities. This is how you work with ethnic groups. And one thing that in social work, they stress so much about making sure you make the other person feel comfortable. Well, within tribal nations, villages, bands, it's all about relationship. You have to identify who you are, where you come from, and who your family is, you know? And so as you can see how we introduced ourselves, I know that Melody is my sister because she's also Pueblo, from the Hopi tribe. I'm the Acoma tribe. So though we're not blood relatives, we are relatives in that sense of
Well,
kinship.
you're also my in-law because
Yes.
I married Sun Clan. So
There you go. And sunglasses. So see, there's a relationship. Tanisha is also, you mentioned that you were Izafana. And so she's related to my dad because my dad is Izafana. And so she's my relative as well. And so when we're talking about relationship and building relationship, it's understanding what that structure is. And so, and I just kind of wanted to reiterate, like, who we are as a collective and why we are talking about what may seem like little minor details, but these minor details is what tells the story of, one, who we are. It tells the story of the communities that we work with, and it also tells the story of how we develop kinship. And so that's who we are as a collective. So we're not going to talk about the services. We're not going to talk about grants. We're not going to talk about, like, that is not who we are. Maybe that's the job we're in, but as a collective, that I just really wanted to just kind of stress that that's not the conversation we are going to have here in regards to who we are as the Honor Collective.
were there any questions people had? Because I know this is a pretty unique approach to working with communities.
I did want to say, though, some of the events that we host and some of the events that we are asked to be a part of, we do bring in Indigenous and mental health providers. So we are trauma informed. We do take that very seriously. And so when we do host events or are a part of events, we make sure that there is a provider that's able to help process in those moments. Another thing I wanted to point out as well is we believe victims. We believe victims without question. And I know right now, you know, with just what happens and, you know, with society and all its challenges within our tribal nations, bands and villages, we believe victims because no one else will. And so we create those safe spaces for them.
You know, and until someone stops me and raises their hand, I can keep going all day.
Oh yeah, totally.
On top of believing victims, this means also that we break silence culture.
Definitely.
Because that's a big thing for us, is silence culture where no one's talking about it. And so you also, when I say we break silence culture, we really do, we really will name it, whatever that it is. So if it's STD awareness, you know, we'll name body parts, we'll say vagina, you know, things like that. We will honestly talk about things as they need to be said. We don't coach it. We don't couch it and make it comfortable. When we talk about, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say, there is a question from Alyssa, and she asked if the 4Rs framework was something we created, or did it originated from a specific Indigenous culture?
Good question. Earlier, I put in
I'll post it in.
The 4 R's from Kirkness and Barnhardt. It actually, the 4 R's with that name, with those 4 particular value sets, were named by Canadian educators, so First Nations people. However, those values, and the reason we use them is because we are intertribal and we're multi-generational. So because of that, we had to pick things that were outside our traditional languages, but that touched all of us in a meaningful way. And that's actually really useful for us as we go into different tribal communities and urban Indian communities, that we can root ourselves in those concepts. Just so you know, if I really like reading, like see all that Indigenous brilliance behind me. I really, really like reading. And there are probably about 9 R's now.
Oh yeah.
But again, just to start with, as a baseline, as a discussion, these 4 R's, and Kelly said it, but I'm going to re-say it. How does it apply for yourself? How does it apply as you interact in your org? How does it mean when you go into community? It means different things all the time. Oh, have we applied? Oh, I'm not going to even answer. I think other people should answer. What are any challenges with the 4 R's that we've had applying
I will
outside? Sorry.
outside. Yes, definitely. Well, it's hard to say outside. I mean, there's always going to be challenging outside of Indigenous, tribal, native spaces. That's first and foremost always going to be a challenge, no matter what, only because of, the spaces that we're in. And, you got policies, you got state law, whatever. I'm now working in a public health field-ish. And so those are some of the challenges that I have in those spaces, because it's mainly about re-education. And it takes away, when I'm wanting to talk about a topic, for me, it takes away from finding the solution, because I have to re-educate once again. And that can take within itself an hour of the conversation, and then you have 5 minutes to find a solution. And so I think the challenge altogether is, it's inevitable. We understand that. And I'm just going to be blunt here. You all can look up Google yourselves and understand some of those peer review articles in regards to Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous frameworks. You've got tribal critical race theory that you can look into. Now you have an article on respect of the 4 R's. And so it shouldn't really be in a space where we have to constantly educate, though, like I said, it is inevitable. So those are some of the challenges that I have faced in those non-Indigenous spaces. But one of the challenges we also face is, we already know that we're going to have non-Indigenous challenges with the 4 R's. That's something we already know as a collective. We already know that we're going to have to educate. We already know that these are the spaces where we're going to have to set it up, right? One challenge that we do actually mainly have, and this, and I, my collective, our collective could disagree, but I feel like I find more challenges within the tribal nations because of the assimilation and the colonial, just being assimilated and colonized. We have to be able to understand, and when we're working with our tribal nations, our Indigenous people. And so I feel like we know there's going to be challenges from non-Indigenous, but I feel like the main challenges is working with Indigenous, because of assimilation, because of colonization, because of the boarding school experience, all that learned behavior and trauma. Trauma has actually become a buzzword in social work, to tell you the truth. And so we don't just talk about historical trauma. At least I don't. I talk more about historical trauma and chronic illness, historical trauma and family structure, historical trauma and environmental justice. It all applies, and that's one thing that I feel like is that challenge for me personally.
Also, we don't generally work in non-native spaces. A good question. Anyone else want to cover an R?
Oh, someone has their hand raised.
Ooh, all right, Peter.
Hi, aloha, kia ora. I'm Peter Matara from Hawaii. Thank you for your presentation on the 4 hours, and I think you are right, Melody. There's probably more than 9 hours now, but I was really interested because at CSWE in Atlanta, Georgia, right, I raised the concern that the EPAS standards talks about tribal status, but being here in the Pacific, I'm actually not Hawaiian, by the way, and I'm here on the North Shore in the Ahupua'a of Hauula, where I live. So I'm from Aotearoa. But my question is, well, not my question. My point is, there's nothing said in the new EPAS about Pacific Island or other Native Indigenous peoples that are not tribal. So we don't fall into that category. But I really appreciate your thoughts, because a few years ago I met and worked with some Native communities, and one of the women said this, and to follow on from your point, Kelly, that if we don't address healing with trauma, then what we're actually doing, and this is her quote, it's to commit genocide by proxy if we do not create or talk about our healing and our truth telling. And and so some of the work that's been done here in the Pacific in Hawaii is we don't, and those R's are wonderful. I Barnhardt and Kirkness's work and others are great. But one of the things that we struggle with and we kind of framed it as a couple of 3 other R's that aren't so positive, right? And that we have to discuss. And one of them is rage.
Yes.
How do we address that internally? But how do we address that when we're angry at what's happening to our communities? The other one is the risks we take in doing that, and the need for us to not only be resilient, but to also to be resistant, right? And that's, like talking about Anissa's work around environmental justice, and Mother Nature, and her resistance. So I just wanted to maybe see your comments about sort of like your thoughts about the idea of we must incorporate healing into all the work we do as social workers. And your thoughts about those other 3 things that are ours that some of the Native Hawaiian people here are really adamant and needs to be discussed amongst ourselves. Aloha.
Oh God, can we just have a discussion on rage?
Yes.
For reals. I don't want to lead it because I want to jump in, but seriously, let's talk about that for a minute. And then we'll start with the Care Bear herself. Do you want
Little
to
old
share
me.
anything about rage?
Against the machine.
I definitely, that's like such a cool point to bring up, like as another R to consider, as like rage, because like I can only speak for myself, but like, rage, I guess people could be like, oh, that's a bad thing. But for me, it's like what kind of drives me to do a lot of the stuff that I do. And yeah, I kind of, not to be like, if anyone finds this cheesy, but like sacred rage, like get stuff done. And obviously, like, other kinds of rage that are maybe more detrimental need to be like addressed in other ways. But like for me, I don't know, like rage kind of drives me to like want to like help people and care for people, just like from seeing what they're going through, and that bothering me so much, just like trying to use my anger to like do something with it, I guess. And I don't know, that's like a cool thing to think about, because maybe like that can be like a way that we address that with community, like people who are experiencing like anger and rage, like maybe that is a way to like address it, as like telling people like, yeah, it's okay to be angry, like it's normal for you to be full of rage. Like, now how can we like use your energy to like do something, whether it's like to help yourself or to get involved with something that you care about. But it's funny that they're like, oh, the Care Bear, because like secretly I'm deeply full of rage. Which I guess is not a secret now, because I just told however many of you are on the Zoom, but yeah.
You're recorded now. It's out. Yeah. I'm gonna.
Tanisha, how about Tanisha? Tanisha, what do you feel about rage? How are you raging?
I think what Anissa said, I think I could agree with, because rage is something that drove me personally as well. For myself, is just finding the positive in the rage to keep going and getting my life different than maybe how I was brought up as a child, and making it into a positive. So I like the word sacred rage, because all I can say is that normalizing rage is something that needs to be addressed. And I agree with what Anissa said.
I want to tackle this for a very specific reason. It's because I was having post-COVID, I think all of us in the helping professions, while other people were losing jobs, our jobs got 1,000 times more intense. And so our COVID experiences were definitely very different. My COVID experience was extremely different, as I literally could not mourn and could not go home, could not have ceremony. And what that happened and what bottled up inside of me during that time, and actually a lot of it was rage. And I do something called a window between worlds. It's an art expression program. And I did an entire thing on rage. And oh God, I almost wish this could be bleeped out of the recording. But what I decided to do, I'll say it so no one could really see it that far, was I
can pause if you want me to.
Pause. This is too personal. Really share that. It's a very powerful image, and doing that personal work was very intensive, and I think helped me come out of a very difficult place so that I could engage community. And because I was not in a space for a while when we've mentioned people will step out of honor. People sometimes got to take care of themselves. Sometimes it's rage, sometimes it's sadness, sometimes it's just exhaustion. There's a lot going on in the world. People are needed in many directions. You just saw the hats Kelly has. Like, everybody here has multiple hats. And so I need to take a step back, because I was way too angry, and I really, really love that subject. To me, that should be its own workshop, like just Indigenous people, because just living every day to day in a colonized space, there's a certain amount of rage. I hate the word microaggressions. I don't feel anything micro about it at all. Totally
Yeah.
pissed off. And it's very macro, and when it's daily, that it needs to go somewhere. And so luckily I was allowed to process that and honor we could process that together. So I don't know how much time.
I just wanted to just kind of touch on that too. And I do agree with what the collective has said. And one of the things too about structure is everything is in a time slot. And I think with Indigenous tradition, we kind of go with the flow. So Sometimes we go longer. But I did want to talk, Peter, thank you so much for, talking about rage and risk. And I do wanted to talk about, I do agree with Anissa there that you can sacred rage, if you will. But I also believe that rage is a normal emotion, but it's how we use it and it's how we express that. We've become so colonized and assimilated that the rage we see and the rage that we express has a learned behavioral effect. Not to say that we can't get angry, but there is an original instructions to how we express anger. And I feel that when it comes to the 4 R's, it's, I guess more or less, when it comes to the 4 R's, we want to talk about the positivity on how we can, implement this into the community. How do we implement it in a community that has so much historical trauma and hurt and healing that they need to do, that they're so enraged with whatever is around them? What's the first thing that you would think of? This place needs healing. If that healing means just being there to listen, that's the risk of battling the rage, right? And so when it comes to agendas and it comes to meetings and protocols, all of these things to me personally are noise. Because most of the time, all you need to do is just sit there and listen. And so when it comes to what Anissa was talking about, sacred rage, how can we use that to motivate us to make those healing changes? And it kind of sucks, actually, because you're like, what's the fast way to fix this when someone is angry? Technically, that's not your journey to fix. You can only provide a guide. You can only provide that listening ear. And so a majority of the time, whether we like it or not, rage is always going to be there. But what can we do with the 4 R's to model how to rage, if you will? And no matter what, like, you're taking a risk in everything. You're risking your morals, you're risking your values, you're risking giving a piece of yourself to making sure that whatever you're trying to educate or whatever you're trying to implement is going to be taken away in a positive way. But the lateral violence that we have within our own community and the lateral oppression, that's a part of the assimilated and colonial experience, the colonization. How do we combat that within ourselves before we're able to educate the community about? And that, Peter, to tell you the truth, that I've had that. I actually just recently was talking to the collective, like, I think I'm mad right now. I think I'm so mad at the space that I'm in. I was like, I don't think I'm on a collective material right now because I don't see peace within myself. And I noticed that in myself because I started mouthing off. I created an ego within myself. I knew more than you guys, like, I knew more than everybody around me, and I was getting snippy and disrespectful. That was how I was expressing my rage. And so I think when it came down to it, it was more like I need to either go with the flow in this journey of rage, but I also needed to take myself out of the space of positiveness because I did not want my rage to affect the collective and the healing that they're doing. Not that they weren't going to be like, Kelly, you need to get out of here. I took myself out of the space of, community planning and engaging, but I kept myself in a space of the matriarchy, of the, non-binary, of the collective to kind of help guide me through these feelings. That's how I implemented that Indigenous side to rage and risk. I was risking my vulnerability to deal with that, rage. So sorry. Yeah. I
Question ever, right?
right. This is an ongoing conversation, Peter. That was a good question.
Medicine heals. Kelly, Want to talk about medicine heals really quickly? This is a kind of a
Yes. Okay. So medicine heals is a so medicine heals being healing every ancestral lineage through storytelling. So that's what HEAL stands for. And Medicine Heals is actually a peer support group for Indigenous professionals by Indigenous professionals. It's an Indigenous only space. And it's a space where our Indigenous community, our Indigenous professionals, our Indigenous, just anybody that can come into this space and express and have those conversations such as what Peter had brought up. What do we do with rage? What do we do with rage in the organizations that we're working for that continue to uphold white supremacy? What do I do with that? What do I do with the policies and procedures that go against my morals and values and community structure, right? And so this is a space that we have these conversations. And so one of the last conversations we talked about was, how colonized are you? And what does healing shame look like? And these are tough conversations within our Indigenous communities because we really can't answer that specifically. And so what we did, I'm a co-founder. I have 2 other co-founders. One of them is actually taking a space to himself right now, but I have another facilitator and co-founder who helps facilitate these conversations with me. It's held every second Wednesday for our Indigenous participants here. It's held every second Wednesday. And this is a space, and I only say this within respects to my Indigenous community. This is a space for our Indigenous persons only because they need more of that support on how to navigate these structures, how to navigate these agencies, and just how to have that support, especially when they're away from home. And so this is a space where we can provide that guidance for them. But it's every second Wednesday. And you can follow our Instagram page as well. It's Medicine Heals on Instagram. And so yeah, so that's what Medicine Heals is.
I don't know if it looks like there's no other questions. So does each matriarch want to have a closing thought for this group?
I mean, I have 2. So one of the things that I have learned with being a part of this collective and just in the profession that I've been in, is that within the Westernized framework, we always talk about make sure that you're taking care of yourself before you take care of others. And I kind of want to take a step back from that a bit and have each of you explore within Indigenous cultures, in a majority of them, we take care of others before we take care of ourselves. We pray for others before we pray for ourselves. Because when then we get sick, the others can take care of us. That's what we call building relationship. And with that being said, Sun King, who's an Afro-Indigenous businesswoman, advocate, she said one thing during a speech that I heard her say, and it's just stuck with me, and I take it all the way. She says that she is community made. She is not self-made. And I want that to kind of really dig into you all as social work professions, is that is what we mean when we say we are beyond the code of ethics. We are all community made, whether it's within family, whether it's having a mentor, whether it's, just even an instructor that pushed you to go further in what it is, that is community. With their guidance, you are community made. You're not self-made. Otherwise, you would have invented fire, right? And another thing as well is that walking away within my culture, the Navajo culture, we have the trickster, which is the coyote. And everyone blames the coyote for everything. But one elder had talked to me about, let's not blame the coyote. let's use them as a lesson. Be a coyote, but make good trouble. And so I kind of use that in my space as well, because the trouble that I'm making, if you will, is breaking silent culture, bringing healing to community, talking about rage, Peter. And that's the risk, you know, that I'm taking, is I'm making myself vulnerable enough to make good medicine, to make good trouble. And so those are the two things that I kind of just want to close within myself for you all.
Lovely, Kelly. Who'd like to go next?
That is really hard to go off of, but I think I just want to say, like, being a part of Honor for these 5 months has taught me a lot, and implementing the 4 R's, I am always learning. And the 4 R's of respect, responsibility, relationship, and reciprocity is an ongoing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it is true, it's all about restoration and healing within communities, creating a safe place for yourself and the community, and just try to implement the 4 R's. And it's, again, I really encourage the journey of implementing the 4 R's in your community. But yeah, that was really hard to talk, Kelly.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
You're not talking. You're adding.
Yeah, you're not. You are. Tanisha is an awesome person, and so she's on a very powerful journey, and she's discovering herself, and she's discovering all of us, and she's another soon-to-be caregiver. No.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, I don't know if I have like, I guess, closing words other than like, I mean, I guess just building off of what Kelly and Tanisha have said about like learning how to implement the 4 R's. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not just honor that I try to like bring that into, like, it's become, if you look at it like kind of just like, not to be silly, but like a lifestyle or like a way of life, like it really helps like in a lot of ways, like, you know, with work, you can apply it to work. You can also apply it to like your interpersonal relationships or whatever with like family and friends or just like strangers and that kind of thing. Because like, you know, each time you like use the 4 R's, it just makes it like that much stronger in your brain. And so it'll become like a habit. So that's what I'm kind of like, I guess we'll leave you with. Like, I guess just consider it and be like, is this like, I mean, I think it applies to everybody, but like if you think it's something you want to learn more about, just like do little small steps. Like for me, like at my work computer in my office, I have like a sticky note with like the 4 R's like on my monitor so I can see it. So I'm like, okay, the 4 R's, like, you know what I mean? Just like doing what you can to like make small changes for yourself. It's like the ripple effect, you know? It'll like go into your relationships and then other people be like, oh, that's how that person acts. And maybe they'll learn something from you and that, you know, carries on and carries on and carries on. So yeah, I guess that's what I will say. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening to us.
Awesome. Yeah, and I held up my little post-it note right here by the computer, and he says so. Sometimes more handy than others. I would just say that what you're seeing here, this is what it takes to engage our communities. It's more than any particular mission statement. It's more than any grant can contain. It's so, and it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time for people to actually see this is who you are authentically. This is who your organization is authentically. We trust you. And so that's, I guess, the big message I was hoping that we could help get across. Yes, right now it's full of a lot of social workers because the other ones are sick, but this applies cross disciplines. And we learn together, we train together, we go to like Native Wellness Institute trainings together. So we are not the experts and end all be all. We don't portray ourselves as knowing everything. We go in humbly in to ask communities, no matter whether we have PhDs, JDs, or MSWs. We come in like this. We come in as kinship. We come in as relatives to everyone. And I think that's how I just want to close is thank you for seeing and being part of our kinship circle today.
Thank you for letting me be part of you circle. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Awesome.
If anyone has, some other things to add, I want to just mention that there's a lot of thanks and a lot of appreciation in the chat as well. So thank you, each of you, for your time and the self that you were able to give us tonight. I do want to let folks know that this was recorded, that this will be available to share with those who were not able to join us live this evening or who had to join late. And I will have the tools or the handouts that were shared in the chat box as well available, so people will be able to access those at another time too. So just thank you all so much for your leadership and for sharing with us tonight. And for me, for giving me a reminder of breaking down and rebuilding what community means. I feel like that was kind of a lesson that I found this evening for myself. So thank you so much for your evening. We appreciate your time, and have a great evening or a great rest of your day wherever you're located across the country.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.